Hello, good afternoon. You are welcome to class. We shall be looking at conflict management. Conflict management. And I will go through the course note once again so that we can keep ourselves abreast of some of the things we have discussed before. Conflict is a necessary evil. In fact, everywhere you have human beings gathering together to do anything, there is bound to be conflict. Even when Jesus was here on earth, there was an element of conflict among the disciples. And the conflict revolved around who is going to be the greatest among us, so which we can call power tussle. And that is one of the conflicts that characterized the church from the beginning, the consciousness of power, who will be, who will sit, who will be there, and things like that. There are different types of conflict. Homogeneous conflict, that is conflict within the same enclave, within the same organization, within the same society, like the one we are looking at, that is conflict in the church. So this is a conflict within the people who believe almost the same thing. You know, when we say the church, there are different levels of organizations within the church. Let's take Nigeria, for example. You have Christian Association of Nigeria, where you have all kinds of denominations coming together to form an association. Now, in that type of association, there is bound to be elemental conflicts originating from various beliefs, various doctrines, various dogmas and practices. The same thing is applicable to Pentecostal Fellowship of Nigeria. That is where you have all Pentecostals, charismatics coming together to form an organization. In that place also, you will still have conflict arising from various ways of seeing things, various beliefs, various dogma, various practices, and several things like that. Now, even within the same organization, within the same denomination, there is also bound to be occasional conflict. In fact, even in the family level, there is bound to be occasional conflict. So anywhere you have human beings, conflict is inevitable. In fact, the scripture even says that even in heaven, there was conflict, which was between the God and his angels and Lucifer, who eventually became the devil, and the 1/3 of angels that followed him. So conflict is necessary. In fact, there is no amount of prayer that will remove conflict altogether from the church. It is something that needs to be managed. We need to live with it. We need to learn how to manage it. We need to learn how to make the best out of it. Now, there are two major things we can do with conflict. Conflict can be a catalyst for growth, for progress. It depends on the way it is managed. Most of the major progress you have in history were occasioned by conflict. There was a time that there were crises, different types of war happened. So during the war, you see those who didn't know how to do certain things, necessity will force them to learn how to do those things. There was a time that women were not working in factories, they were not working in big organizations. But during the war, especially the World War, when men have been drafted into war, there was nobody to manage the factories, to manage the production. So they drafted the women into war. And that initiated a process by which women now begin to study the same things that men study, and they are doing exploits even in the world today. So that's the good side of conflict. And if you bring it to the church also, there was a time that the church stayed in Jerusalem and they refused to spread, they refused to go out. But there was a conflict, there was a problem. persecution came and they were scattered. And as they were scattered, they were preaching as they were going. So the evangelization of the world began in earnest as a result of conflict. There was a time that Catholicism was the only denomination, so to say. There was conflict occasioned by the reformers' doctrinal disagreements, which made the Protestants to leave. And as they were leaving, they were also opening new churches, evangelizing, winning more souls. And then there have been several breakaways, breakups, which have now made the gospel to spread and cover almost the entire universe. So that is the good side of conflict. Conflict can make people to discover their ingenuity. If you trust somebody to help you now and the person refused to help, the person disappointed you, that can be a trigger for you to discover yourself and what you can do. So that's the good side of conflict. Now, there's also a negative side of conflict in that it can destroy everything. Great empires in history were destroyed by conflict. As powerful as the Greeks were, they were able to come together, fight the external aggression, but internal wrangling, internal conflict destroyed them. Alexander the Great and his team were able to conquer the then world, but internal problem of Alexander the Great made him also to die prematurely. And the same thing is applicable to virtually all the empires that have existed in history. So that is the negative side of conflict. Conflict can destroy. Let's look at the church. No matter what anointing does, anointing can build a very big church, a very big organization, bring millions of people together under one umbrella. Power of God can do those things. Church growth, we apply the principles of church growth, we can raise a church to an enviable height. But if conflict is not properly managed, that big organization can be brought down within few days. That's how powerful conflict is. And so it is not something we run away from. It is not something we even completely pray off. No, it has to happen. That's why we need to learn how to manage conflict. Anywhere human beings are, conflict is inevitable. Now, why are we studying this course? Why is it very important? Number one, it's important because the ministry has changed. Rapid changes globally has affected the church beyond what you can think. The church of 40 years ago, 30 years ago, is not the church of now. In fact, the pre-COVID church is not the same as the post-COVID church. So many things are changing. And the advent of information and communication technology has also changed and remodified the way we do so many things. And if a church or a pastor is not in tandem with the requirements of his generation, he will be left behind. And that is not going to be a good one. So changes are very rapid now. Changes are very fast. And these changes go with generational conflict, which we need to be familiar with and be able to manage. The issues in the church 50 years ago were not issues in the church now. The level of commitment of the people to a denomination, to a church, 40 years ago is not the same as now. Because 40 years ago, there was less access to alternatives. Everybody was only listening to his pastor. On Sunday during the week, there were no options of preaching on radio, TV, internet, where you can now compare so many things together. But as we are now, the globalization has made the church to become a global church. That somebody may be talking in this place and people are watching from all over the world. So these are changes that have come. And these changes have come also with so many challenges, with its own conflict, and we have to manage them. Now, it has been discovered that after every major conflict in history, it always led to massive growth of churches. Let's take an example, the World Wars. After the First World War, which was almost the same time with the first pandemic, so many people died. And so the consciousness of death came to the people, and they saw the need to serve God. So the same thing happened after the Second World War. Big ministries came up, people ran to God. The same thing happened in Nigerian Civil War. After the Civil War, there was revival. People began to seek God. The same thing happened after the September 11 in US. Those who were not serving God because saw the need, because they discover that this life is temporal and that there is eternity that we need to seek. So something tragic, something bad can also produce something positive. And so, which is similar to what I've explained earlier as part of the positive side of conflict. Now, there are four major trends in the church of today. Number one, we have more educated laity in the church of today. There are church members who are well educated, who are studying their Bible. Some of them have studied Bibles. They are exposed to various preaching conferences, and so they know. We're no longer dealing with a bunch of novices who only depend on what the pastor say. You're not dealing with laity that are educated, laity that are exposed to the gospel, laity that some of them are spirit-filled, highly anointed. So it is no longer business as usual. Number two, there is less trust in centralized authority, unlike before. There was a time that even in our traditional societies, everybody depended on the king. Whatever the king said was final. It's no longer so. And the same thing was applicable to church, whatever the GO said and all that. But those things are changing, especially in the civilized world, and it will eventually get to the developing nations. Number three, there is decreased denominational commitment, because you have a church member now who technically belong to about 10 denominations. During this major program is there, this major program is there, this major program is there. So it has decreased the commitment of an individual to one local church. And number four, it has lowered the clerical authority. There was a time that pastors were just like God's people, whatever they said was final. But with the media war, exposure of dark sides of the church and so many things, the society no longer trusts pastors as they used to be. And so all these things should harm the pastor of this generation to be able to deal with the conflict that this generation has presented. Now, one of the things that is happening presently is that pastors are leaving pastoral ministry. This is already more worrisome in Europe, in America, and there is every tendency that we get to Asia and Africa. There are a lot of issues that come up, conflict within the church, within the denomination, within a local setting, that makes pastors to be depressed and frustrated, and some of them decided to abandon the ministry, abandon pastoring altogether. Now, we have two categories. There are those who leave pastoral ministry for other kinds of ministry, because pastoral ministry, especially where you keep people in the same place all the time, there is more tendency of conflict than somebody, maybe an evangelist, an hospital minister, a prison minister, who just goes somewhere, minister, come back. He's not staying with them. So people prefer such ministries now, where they are not just sitting down with people somewhere and settling cases, handling conflicts, and all that. So according to a study carried out by OG and Wengers in 2005, this study tried to outline reasons why people, especially pastors, leave pastoral ministry. And then they were able to come up with 7 points, which I'm going to outline now. Number one, is divorce and marital problems. The marital problems are coming up all over the world. You now hear of pastors divorcing their wives, picking another wife, family conflict. Especially in denominations where these things are not allowed, such pastors will abandon the ministry and go because they cannot stay inside the church when their family is not intact. Their church does not allow it. So that is one of the reasons why pastors leave the ministry now. Number two, sexual misconduct. Where there is a sexual misconduct and is blown open, the shame of it to stay with the same members become very difficult. We have seen mega pastors in America and several places who lost their pastorate to escalated sexual misconduct or sexual problems. And then number three, feeling of burnout or frustration. There's a book called Pastors at Risk, which highlights several reasons why pastors get depressed. So there are a lot of issues in the ministry that makes pastors to be depressed. And when burnout sets in and they cannot recover, many of them eventually abandon the ministry and go and do something else. And number four, which is very major, conflict in the congregation. Especially the one that the pastor cannot manage. When conflict takes a dimension that is beyond comprehension, there are pastors who get so fed up. Some of them die prematurely. Some get so depressed, frustrated. When a church of 5,000 scattered and remain like 100 people, 50 people. So the frustration, the attendant burnout can force pastors out of the ministry. And number five is conflict with the organization, conflict within the denomination, where there is a denominational problem and a pastor finds himself at the other side of the divide that lost the battle. So to be reintegrated back into the fellowship because of shame, many of them will just abandon the ministry altogether to go and look for something else to do. And then number six is poverty, need to care for their family. It is generally so for pastors of small churches are not well taken care of because of finance. And so to take care of their family, sometimes children are becoming wayward, dropping out of school. Pastor may just, because of that, abandon the ministry, go back to his former trade, or go and look for something else to do. And then finally, looking for another kind of ministry, like I mentioned earlier. When conflict is getting too much in the local church, some get fed up with it and say, well, let me go and look for another kind of ministry. Let me find fulfillment somewhere else where it will be less conflictual. So these are some of the things that push pastors out of the ministry. Now, there are about 3 stages of conflict, which I'm going to run through. And in our next class, we will move forward and begin to see solutions to some of these problems I highlighted here. Now, the first stage of conflict is a mild one. That is maybe number one, where there is controversy in the church, which can be a small biblical controversy, doctrinal controversy, lifestyle controversy. These are things that can easily be managed by proper Bible study, proper symposia, proper interaction, proper dialogue, seeing a better light, and things like that. And when this is managed, then the church can move forward. The church is baked in the oven of controversies over the years. There are always conflicting opinions. Even within the denomination, we hold different views about several things. Ability to manage all these things make the church to be better for it, and then the church begin to move forward. Number two, various interests, which is normal. Anywhere you gather human beings together, self-interest will come in. And so these various interests will be tearing the church into different directions. And if these things are not well managed and balanced, it can create conflict. And by the way, nobody will say that he is fighting for his selfish interest. Everybody will always present something, a tenable reason why he is fighting. But if you look at it critically, you will realize that there is selfish interest at the back of the whole thing. So, and number three, different styles. This is common in churches that transfer their pastors. The former pastor was evangelistic and people are used to that style. When a new pastor comes who is an introvert, who is not evangelistic, but is a very good teacher, methodical, there will be initial conflict because people are used to a particular pattern. And so it will take time. It doesn't need to fight them. You should know that it will take time to move them from where they were to where the church is now. So these are the three minor things that can create the first level conflict in the church. How do we manage them? There are two wrong ways of managing conflict. Number one is avoidance. When you know that there's conflict in the church as a pastor, but you are avoiding it. They say, well, you can just be avoiding it and then you organize program, revival, just be avoiding it and then keep going as if all is well, but underneath all is not well. In fact, it's been proven that in the church, if there is a conflict and it's not addressed, even if you bring the greatest evangelist and he does program, during the program, everybody will be happy, jubilating. You will think that the problem is solved. It's not solved. It's just on the surface. Underneath, after a while, the thing will still come up. So avoiding the conflict is not the best. And number two is obliging the conflict. That is where the pastor now abdicates his responsibility. Maybe there's a conflict between the church and the pastor. There's a doctrinal disagreement in which the pastor is right, but because he doesn't want conflict, so he says, okay, church, do whatever you want to do. You are correct. Okay, whatever you want. I don't want problem. Just go ahead. That's not how to pastor church. So that means whatever anybody just come up with, because you don't want problem, you say, let's just continue. So that is still postponing the evil days. It's not the best way of handling conflict. Now, the second stage of conflict is a deeper conflict. This is when conflict gets to a win-lose situation. You have two factions in the church. And a faction is hell-bent on winning. The other one must lose. Now, it's a very delicate conflict to manage because if you support the winning group, the losers will leave the church. So it's dicey. A pastor should be able to find a middle ground and be factual so as to be able to bring the two teams together on a table where they agree on what is right. Sometimes both of them may be wrong. Sometimes one of them is right, one of them is wrong. But in conflict, it's discovered that nobody will be 100% right and nobody will be 100% wrong. There must be element of misunderstanding which, if balanced, the church will continue to move forward. So then, competition, where when the church gets to a competitive stage, this is very common, maybe in a diocese, in a district, common among pastors. Competition makes you to look down on what your opponent is doing. You look for a way to just run him down. You look for a way to run what he's doing down. You have seen a conference where the first speaker will come up and do so well. And then the next speaker, because they are competing, the next speaker will deliberately abandon his own beat and do everything possible to tear down what the former one had said so that he will not run away with the influence. So this is deeper conflict. So everything they do at this level must be to settle scores. It's deeper than the first one we are discussing. It's that underlying competition that defines everything anybody does. And it's not the best. And so you may, even in giving, there are people give not because they love God, but just to show that they are better than the other man. Even the song leader, we abandon the Holy Spirit and just do everything possible to outdo the other one, even the choir. So it's a problem. It's a problem. It's a level of conflict that rendered the church impotent. The Spirit of God will not move because people are carnal. Everything is carnally done. So it's a deeper kind of conflict. Now, when this is allowed, there are things that will be happening. One, there will be a high level of gossip in the church. There will be sarcasm. You see the pastor climbing the pulpit and abusing the people, insulting the people, because there is underlying conflict that has reached a deeper level that you can no longer be objective. And then there will be misinformation. What the pastor did not say, somebody will say he said it. What the other sister did not say, somebody will say she said it. So all these things will begin to go on, and there will be undue generalization. That's where somebody will just get up and say that all the women in this church are wicked. All the men in this church are adulterers. At that level, there will be generalization of things. There won't be objectivity. So it's a problem. Now, solution to this, like we mentioned in the first level of conflict, that you don't need to run away. Just address it, balance it, and it will be settled. Now, this deeper one, this second level of conflict, number one, you separate the person from the problem. For example, now, there's a particular person that is causing conflict in the church. And this person that is causing conflict, let's say is a Yoruba man, for example now, he's a Yoruba man, and the pastor is not a Yoruba man. Now, in addressing this conflict, if you now say that this is the way Yorubas behave, no, you are addressing person, not the problem. And you are doing undue generalization. We do all these things a lot. So you separate that person, isolate him from his tribe, isolate him from his gender. No, it's not a general gender thing. The Naso women, they do. No, all these youths are fornicators. No, that's very wrong. Isolate the person from his group. Then deal with the problem, not the person. There is nobody that is 100% bad. That man who is causing trouble now has other positive areas he is helping the church. So separate issues. Deal with the problem. That is number one. Number two, separate the person from his opinion. Somebody may have a different opinion from you. It doesn't make him your enemy. Opinions differ. Even between husband and wife, opinions may differ. It's bound to differ. It's bound to differ. So you separate opinion from the person. Don't attack person. Deal with the opinion. Somebody who is bringing a wrong opinion today may bring a better one tomorrow. That's the way these things go. And then number three, remove emotion. Remove feelings. Emotions destroy things. It makes conflict to fertile. We don't deal with conflict at the level of emotionalism. You will say things you shouldn't say. That's the area where pastors just get up because somebody has misbehaved among the members, they abuse the old members, insulted the old members, or maybe members are not coming to weekly activities, and then you use the weekly activity day to insult those who are around. Now, the people who are the culprits are not even around. And so those who were with you before lost confidence in you, and you lost all completely. So remove emotions, remove feelings. Don't allow happenings to influence your preaching or your teaching. Let them not see it on your face. That's what makes you a mature man of God. And then number four, deal with issues objectively. It's very difficult to be objective, but you must learn how to be objective to be able to handle the second level of conflict, which is a deeper conflict. Be objective. Don't be subjective. Now, how do we resolve conflict? The process. Number one, once you realize that there is conflict in the church, things are not going the way it should, call a meeting. And research has shown that meeting to resolve conflict is better done in an informal environment. It may be an eatery, a sport arena, somewhere far away from official center. It has a way of making people to relax. It has a way of making them to say their mind. Take them away from official quarters, where there's a way official quarters make people to be stiff. Take them on a picnic, get them something to drink, relax, talk about so many other things, play together, then you bring up the issue. People are relaxed to talk, and you say that the case will be better handled. Number two, such a meeting, set an agenda for it. Because if you have no agenda, something else will hijack what you want to do. And at the end of the day, you will not even touch the reason why you call the meeting. So you set an agenda and stay on that agenda. The tendency to stray off is there. You are trying to raise a matter and somebody flared up and open a matter that is different from the one you are discussing. When that happens, you may be drifted away from the real matter and begin to address irrelevant issues, and the whole time will go. So stay on it. And number three, be neutral. Even if your wife is involved, or your son is involved, or somebody from your tribe, be neutral. Let everybody see that you are neutral. It will allow your judgment to be accepted. And number four, you must be in control. There are times that they may hijack meeting from the leader's hand, and you won't know what to do. In fact, we've seen situations where the leader even got annoyed and people are the one now telling him to calm down. Somebody wanted to settle crisis. It is others now telling him himself became part of the crisis, so it shouldn't be. So be in charge of the meeting, and then don't raise your voice, no matter how provoked you are. Don't raise your voice. Don't use labels. Labels that's the way you used to do. That's the same way I've heard your story. No, those are labels. Don't use label. That's the way somebody reported you. No, don't go there. Just deal with the issue at hand. Don't use label. And then seek, as much as you can, seek for a win-win situation. No matter how bad the case is, try to balance it. Let both parties feel that you are objective. Win-win situation. And then finally,